So as we have seen, Apex is a programming language, right? Programming language is basically a language through which we can give instructions to the Salesforce, right? What we want to do, anything that we want to execute. Okay. Now, so far we have been using Apex with a visual force page, which means Apex was always used with a user interface, right? So your execution of the code was happening through the user interface. Either you are clicking on a button or you're opening the page, then that code gets executed. Now we are actually going to we'll start looking into ways of invoking Apex without a user interface. So it's not that always you're going to click on a button to execute the code. Sometimes you might want to execute code without a user interface in the backend automatically. Okay, am I audible? Okay, give me one moment. All right. So far it has been like you always need a user interface and your Apex code gets executed through user interface. You know, the end user comes, interacts with the page, and either when the page is getting loaded or when someone clicks on a button, that's when the Apex code executes. But this is not going to be the case always. Okay, you cannot always depend on the user interface because sometimes you might want your code or instructions to execute automatically in the backend. Okay, certain logics should run automatically and you cannot be dependent on the user to open a page or click on a button every time. Got it? So now today we are going to look into the other ways of invoking Apex. What are the other different ways of invoking Apex if not through Visual Force page? Right? Okay. Ways of invoking Apex other than Visual Force. You can always combine your Apex logic with the Visual Force page components. That's absolutely fine. But what if I don't have a user interface, or what if I want certain logics to run in the backend? Then how do we do that? The first and the most simple way of executing Apex code is anonymous code block. Okay. What is anonymous code block? Anonymous code block is an option where you can just write an Apex code and execute it. You don't even have to save it. While using it with Visual Force page, we have seen that we need to create a class and then define a method and then save that. Anonymous code block allows you to execute the Apex on the fly. So you just don't have to save it or anything. You just can actually write the code and execute it. Let me just show it to you. All right. So to execute an anonymous code block, all that you have to do is you just have to go to the developer console. If you click on your name, you can go to developer console. Developer console is the place where you can write your code. You can create your Visual Force pages. You can write Apex code. Okay, the way you are creating your Visual Force pages, you can always go and create your page, class. All these things can be created from here also, from the developer console. Okay, this is where you can do the coding stuff. To execute an anonymous code block here, you just have to go to debug and click on open execute anonymous window. So this is the anonymous window. Again, you just need to come to the developer console, click on debug, click on open execute anonymous window. Got it? Now this is where you can just write anything and execute the code. For example, I'll say count A equals a new count, name equals count triple one. Okay, and then I say insert A. Now if I want to just execute it, I'm not trying to save this code or anything, I just want to execute this code. Then all that you need to do is you just need to write it and click on execute. This code will get executed, and what is it actually going to do? It's going to insert this A into the database. Let's see if that works. Click on execute. Okay. Your execution done. Go to accounts. See, the account got created. Correct. So any piece of code that you just want to execute quickly and you don't feel that you need to save it, you can actually go and execute it from the anonymous code block. Okay. Second is an Apex trigger. Okay. What is Apex trigger? Apex trigger is Apex code executed before or after DML. What is a DML? DML stands for data manipulation language. So DML basically are things like insert, update, delete, and delete. These statements are called DML statements, right? So any Apex code that you want to execute before or after the DML statement is Apex trigger, right? Okay. So sometimes what happens is you have that requirement of executing a code before a record is inserted into the database. Okay. Or you want to execute a code, you want to just define this logic that okay, before account record is created, do this. Okay, some instruction you have written. Or before a record is deleted, you want to write a code that needs to be executed. Okay, that is called Apex trigger. Okay, it's very simple to define an Apex trigger. The syntax for defining an Apex trigger is trigger space trigger name, whatever name you want to give to the trigger, on object name for which object you want to define the trigger, event or events on which event you want this to be executed, and your code should come here. That is the syntax of a trigger. Okay, so in case you want to associate your Apex logic with a DML statement that you want the system to execute that logic every time a DML is happening, then you need to define a trigger. The trigger is the code which will get executed along with the DML statement. Okay, before or after. Right. Now this is the syntax for defining it. You'll have to use the keyword trigger. You have to define a name for the trigger, and then you have to give the object name for which object you're defining it. You'll have to give the event basically means the DML statement which you're talking about, and the code that you want to execute should be written here. That's it, right? For example, your logic is like this: before an opportunity is inserted, check amount. If amount is less than 10k, throw error. Okay, so this is what you are trying to achieve using your Apex. Before your opportunity is inserted, check the amount. If amount is less than 10,000, throw an error. Okay, now how are we gonna write this? Trigger, keyword trigger has to be used. I'll give a name for the trigger, which can be anything. Let's say T1 on. Okay, which object are we talking in this case? What is the object?
Opportunity.
It's opportunity. So on opportunity. Fine. And what is the event? When do we want to execute this code?
Before insert.
That is it. Because that's what we want, right? Before an opportunity is inserted. So I want this trigger to be executed before insert. Now, whatever is your code, appropriate code for checking, going and checking the opportunity, go and compare opportunity, if that is less than 10,000, throw error. That code needs to be written here. Got it? So this is how simple it is. Now what will this trigger do? This trigger will make this code run every time a new opportunity is being created. Before that opportunity gets created, this code will execute. Right? If it finds that the amount is less than a certain amount or whatever logic you have defined, it's gonna throw error. As simple as that. So that's what we have in our trigger. Right? Okay. Now, which all events are allowed? Let's understand. So there are 7 events which you can define here. Before insert, before update, before delete, after insert, after update, after delete, and after undelete. Undelete means if a record which was temporarily deleted from the recycle bin, it is undeleted or restored. Okay. So these 7 events are there. You can execute your Apex logic on any one of these events or multiple of them. For example, the same trigger, if you want to check the same thing before update also, before an opportunity is being updated, then you should write before insert, before update. So now this code will get executed when a new record is being created before the record gets inserted, as well as when an existing record is being updated before the update happens. Okay, so these 7 are the possible options in the events. So wherever you want to execute the code, whenever. So that's how simple it is. You just go ahead and define the keyword trigger, then give it a name, on, object name, which event you want to, on which event you want to execute the code, and then the code body. That's it. Right? Okay. So let's do this example, the same example. Okay. So where do you actually go and write this trigger? To write this trigger, all that you have to do is you can just go to the yeah, you just go to setup, customize, opportunity. So you have to go to that object for which you're trying to create the trigger. You have to go to that object. So this time we are creating a trigger for opportunity, so we have to go to opportunities, and under opportunities you will find trigger. So if you were creating a trigger for accounts, you should have gone to setup accounts triggers. Got it? Okay. Now this is where you have the opportunity triggers. Click on new. See, this is where you have to write the trigger. Trigger T1 event before insert. Correct? Now what code you have to write here, that's up to you. What exactly you want to execute. Okay, so this line defines name of the trigger, on which object your trigger is gonna work, and what is the event, when exactly you want the code to get executed. Now what code needs to be executed, that's something which you should write in line number 2. Okay, so now let's come back to this. Now let's see what is the code that we have to write into it. So okay, now this is where I think I'll need help from you guys. How are we gonna write the code? You know the logic which we want to execute. So what is the best way of writing that? You guys want to, may formulate a bit of code and put it in the chat window, or you can suggest me here. What should I write here? Now you know Apex, you know how to define data types, you know what exactly I'm trying to achieve. So I want you guys to help me in writing this code. Yeah. So what should I write? I basically want to check if the amount of the opportunity is less than 10,000 or not. So what is the best way of writing that? I don't know that much of Apex. I need help from you guys.
Create a new memory, then less than 10K.
What is the first thing that I need? What's the first thing that I need? What
Variable we have to
variable? What type of variable do we need?
we'll use list.
You'll use list. Okay. List of opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. Why list? Why not S object? So basically, see,
Because we
going by whatever little knowledge I have on programming, I feel that we need to have a variable, and that variable. Okay, when you are defining a variable, you need a variable for to store some information, right? So basically, I need a variable for my opportunity record. Correct? and then I have to go and compare if the amount of the opportunity is less than 10,000 or whatever. So whatever logic after that. So first thing is a variable, right? To store the opportunity value, correct? So that's important. And to store opportunity value, what variable we need? We need a subject. That's also fine. After that, whatever comparison we want to do, we can do it, right? Now, to define a variable, what is the best way? I want you guys to focus on this, understand this thing. Define a variable. What is the best way of defining it? Defining a new variable. Opportunity O equals new opportunity. This is how we have been defining new as object. Okay. Now the problem is that how will this is a new opportunity, right? How will your program understand that this is the opportunity which is being created, which is in context? Got it? I need to deal with the record which is in context. For example, just look into this. If I'm creating a new opportunity, try and understand the flow. I'm trying to create a new opportunity. Whatever values I put here, and then I click on save. At that point of time, I want this record, the one on the screen, the one in the context, needs to be checked. I need to check the logic against this record, correct? If I say opportunity O equals new opportunity, how will the system understand that O is this opportunity, the one in context? Because that's the second thing, right? That's the second challenge that I have. How do I explain it to my code that O is actually this opportunity or the value or the record in the context? So I basically want to check this record, the one in context. Okay, we call it the record in context. This is the one in context. Okay, so to make our life a lot more easy, Salesforce has done what they have, some context variables. Okay, so you really don't have to actually go and define a new variable. You can work with a context variable. Now what is a context variable? Context variable automatically fetches the record in context. Trigger dot new, this is the context variable. Okay, now what does this context variable return? It returns the list of records in context. Okay, so trigger.new is a predefined variable. You don't have to worry about anything. You just have to use this to get the values of the records in context. So you don't even have to define opportunity O equal new opportunity and all that stuff. So Salesforce has made your life easy. So you just have to go and check in trigger.new the amount is less than 10,000 or not. That's it. So simple. All right. Now, the point is that trigger.new returns a list of records. So basically, the data type is a list here. It's not a single record. Okay. So trigger.new returns a list. Why does it return a list of records? Because trigger.new returns a list of records so that it can work fine for single record as well as multiple records. Sometimes you will be doing an insert operation for multiple records, right? Bulk operations will be done. In that case, you will have multiple records in context, and that is the reason why a trigger.new always returns a list of records. So if it can return a list of records, it will deal with single record as well as multiple records. Fine. So all that we have to do is we just have to go and check if the amount in trigger.new is the record in list of records in context, if the amount in this is less than 10,000 or not. Okay, so what is the best way of checking that? What is the best way of checking if the amount in trigger.new is less than 10,000 or not?
If condition,
Use a select statement.
Sorry, what is that?
Use a select
if
statement with
condition,
where class.
But what has select statement got to do here? I just want to check whether trigger.new's amount is less than 10,000 or not. Isn't that a condition? Isn't that an if condition?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So ideally, I should have something like if trigger dot new dot amount, something like this, right? Less than 10,000, right? I should have something like this. But this is wrong. Why this is wrong? Because trigger.new is not a single record. So you cannot go and check amount for that. It's a collection of records. Correct? So then what do I need to do? Then we need to check the values in trigger.new one by one. Okay. So the best way will be to put a loop here for opportunity O in trigger.new. Now what I've done, I've defined a variable and I have said for opportunity O within trigger.new. So this opportunity O will execute one by one. It will take one record from trigger.new and execute and then again run the loop, right? And here I say now it's fine to compare amount of O because O is now just one record, right? If O amount is less than 10,000, then O dot add error. To throw an error, this is the predefined method, add error. O dot add error will throw the error. Not allowed or whatever error message you want to display. That's it. Fine. So because your trigger.new, the context variable is always going to be a list, you have to define this loop here. Okay. And now what exactly this loop is going to do? This loop is going to check one record from trigger.new. So this O is one more variable that I have defined here. My context variable by default is a list of records. So what I've done, I have defined one more variable here, which is O. You can define it anything. So it's a single S object. Now it will take one value from trigger.new, check it and go back to the loop again. So this loop continues till the time it does not find the error. We'll keep on that. Clear? So this is how simple it is. So just a matter of two lines. So we should write in the code for opportunity O within trigger dot new if O dot amount is less than 10,000, O dot add error. Not allowed. Save it. That's it. So my code is ready. Now every time you try to insert a new record, it's gonna check if the amount of that record is 10,000, less than 10,000. If it is less than 10,000, it's gonna throw error. Save the code and make sure that while you're saving the code is active. Okay, the trigger needs to be active. If you don't make it active, then it will not work. Right, so sometimes you might want to turn it off. You have defined a trigger, but you don't want your trigger to fire. So at that time, you might want to turn it off. But if you want your trigger to work, then you should keep it active. Very similar the way you define a validation rule, workflow rule, approval process. You have to always keep them active. That's the thing here. Also. Okay. So now I'm trying to create an opportunity. Let's see if our trigger is working fine or not. I have put an amount of 7,000, which is less than 10,000. So ideally, it should throw me an error. Let's try to save it. Yes, it throws an error that says not allowed. Clear? That's it. Now let me know if anyone has a question or doubt here so far. Are we clear? Are we defining a trigger? Any questions so far? No? We're good? Okay.
Jeet, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Jeet, we are doing this triggers, but as far as error messages go, especially
Mm-hmm.
for this one, can this be done in validation as well? Because validation is also used for error, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this, if you talk about this scenario, this can be done with
Yeah.
validation message, validation rule also. But the point is that we are doing a very small example just to make things clear to you. But with program,
Right.
you will have your, you can do anything. Instead of throwing an error message, you can actually insert a record somewhere else, which you cannot do through validation rule, right? So with the programming, you
Yeah.
have a lot more options available. The code will get executed through a DML, before or after a DML statement. But this
Yeah.
part control is completely up to you, right? What do you want to do with
Yes.
it? You can actually delete the entire database on a trigger, which you cannot do through
Yeah.
validation rule. So for this example, yeah, seems very similar to a validation rule, but
Yeah.
when you're programming, you have more abilities, you have more control.
And always in a situation, you should always try to use the existing features of Salesforce before going into development.
Yes,
If it can be done through, yeah.
yes. You should always
The
try
only question,
avoid programming as much as possible.
which brings me to the question that, how do we understand whether it's a programming situation or um, it done through a formula using validation? How to recognize this, when you are working on a project?
See, again, this is something which, the moment you get the requirement, you automatically will understand, or with experience, this thing comes. Whether you have
Okay,
to, for example, initially when people start driving a car or something, they do not have that much of
right,
understanding, which gear they should be driving in. But gradually they get it with experience. So you also will have that understanding. So if something can be done
okay,
through validation rule, you should do it
yeah,
through validation rule. If it cannot be done through
yeah,
validation rule, then there is no scope for you. The error
yeah,
that people commonly make, the common error that people make is something which can be done through validation. People start writing program for that. But that's something
right,
which is not the case for at least you guys, because most of you are not that fond of programming. So I think you guys will
right,
anyhow stick to this rule. Yeah, people
okay,
from Java background and all, hardcore programmers, they come into Salesforce and they get into that situation where simple things they start writing program for that. But I don't think that is going to be a problem with you. And anyhow, you guys will get to know situations gradually. So anything where you can
okay,
avoid programming, don't write programming. That's off the track, man. Not related to today's topic. For every
right,
other thing, for every other thing, whatever we are doing in Salesforce.
okay, thanks.
All right. So we have seen how simple it is to write a trigger. Now, after this, once you have defined the event. Now, whatever you want to write here, you can actually write here. Got it? So, okay. Now, one small question. I have written the trigger. I have said before insert. The moment I try to create a new record, it throws an error. I am putting an amount which is less than 10,000. It throws an error. Okay. Let me increase this and make it 12,000. Now I should not have a problem saving it, right? Save it. Wow. That's it. Now the same record I am trying to edit, and on edit I will make it 7,000 again. Now tell me, if I want try to save it now, will it get saved or will it still throw an error?
Now it's saved because you didn't give the update trigger.
It will get saved now,
It,
What?
right? Now it is gonna
yeah,
get
it
saved.
should get saved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why? Because my
Because it's already saved.
Update trigger is not there.
Yeah, because you have asked the security guard to stand on the insert door, but when it is getting updated, there you have not put any logic. So this logic, your trigger logic, is only working when a new record is being created. All right. So now this can be a problem for you. Sometimes your end users can do this. That initially they save it with a certain value and then immediately they go and change it to the other value. So your purpose is not getting solved. You actually wanted to make sure that no new opportunities are taken below 7,000, right? So now for that reason, what you can do, you can put the same trigger on before update also. So all that you have to do is you just have to go and write the other event also here before update. Save it. That's it. Now try to save it. I mean, at the time of editing also, it will not allow you to do that. See? Okay. Now let's make the logic a little more complex. Let's think of a slightly different scenario. Now I want to put another logic here. I say for a new record, okay, for a new record which is being inserted, if amount is less than 10,000, throw error. For an existing record, or for update records where the update is happening, if amount is less than 7,000, then throw error. Okay. In the previous example, what we have done, on before insert and before update, we have put the same logic. The same logic runs for both of them. Before insert, before update, it checks the same criteria and throws the same. But now I want it as slightly different. I say that, okay, if there is a new opportunity which is being created, I want the code to check if the amount is less than 10,000, then it should throw error. However, if an existing record is being updated, then it should check if the amount is less than 7,000 or not, and then throw an error. Now, this is where we have to change the logic a little, right? So here we will need a few more context variables. Okay, come back to the context variables. So we saw one context variable which was trigger.new. Okay, so trigger.new is the context variable which returns the list of records in context for insert operation. Trigger dot old. Okay. Trigger dot old is one more context variable. This returns the list of records in case of a delete and update statement. Okay, so if you're gonna dealing with a delete statement, then your context variable is trigger dot old. Trigger dot old will get the context values in case of a delete operation. Okay.
It should be after update, right? Trigger dot one.
This is before update, this is after update. Then we have some other context variable like trigger dot is insert. Okay. Now, trigger dot is insert is again a context variable. It's the type is boolean. It returns true if trigger was fired due to insert operation. Okay, so trigger dot is insert is a boolean variable which will basically return true if the trigger was fired due to an insert operation. So now here we can use that. So we can check if it was for an insert, then I can go and check if the amount is less than 10,000. If it was through an update, then I can go and check the 7,000. Okay, so this way trigger dot is insert. It's the same way you have trigger dot is update, trigger dot is delete, trigger dot is undelete, trigger dot is before, trigger dot is after. Alright, and the same thing. So trigger dot is update is gonna return true if the trigger was fired due to an update operation. Trigger dot is delete is gonna return true if the trigger was fired due to a delete operation. Now how do we use these context variables? So let's see the example. I'll use this trigger dot is insert and trigger dot is update in this example, the scenario that I'm talking about. So all that you have to do is now this trigger T1 is going to be called. So again, let's try and break it into simple logic. T1 trigger is called on both the events. When a new record is being inserted, before the insert happens, when a record is being updated at that time also, right? All that I have to do is I am just gonna deactivate it and we will write a new trigger for it, just to ensure that you guys understand. So let's go ahead and okay. So give it a name, give your trigger a name, whatever you want. Let's say tree2 on opportunity. This trigger should get fired on before insert as well as before update. But I have two different logics to work for these two events. Okay. So this part is also going to be same. Opportunity within trigger.new. Okay, now what do I need to check this time? I just don't need to check the amount. So if you say amount less than 10,000, That's not enough. I have to check amount based on the trigger event. So I have to write if trigger dot is insert and amount is less than 10,000. So you have to combine your this logic with whether it's an insert or update. So you can write it this way: if trigger dot is insert and amount is less than 10,000, then o dot add error, whatever error message, let's say no opportunity error, minimum value, let's say. Else, if trigger dot is update and amount less than 7,000, then o dot add error, okay, some other error message put here. Now have a look at this. So with my normal comparison that we were doing for the amount, we have also put the condition of if that trigger is insert, then check if amount is less than 10,000. So if it is insert and amount is less than 10,000, then throw error. If it is update and amount is less than 10,000, then throw an error. Okay. Sorry. What is the error here? What mistake have I made? Anyone?
Should be O dot
O
amount.
dot amount.
Yes.
O dot
O dot amount. That's it. Now for an update record, if you put it as 7,000, then it should be fine. See, 7,000 got saved actually. Less than 7,000 has problem. If you make it 6,000, then it's gonna throw an error. Update opportunity error, minimum value 7,000. Fine. So different error message for different event. Correct. So sometimes this may be the case. Sometimes the companies do have this kind of a requirement that if an existing opportunity is there, you want to allow a different limit for an existing record, and you want to allow a different limit for a new record, right? You might allow certain things for the existing records, you might not allow that for the same thing for the new records, right? So that's where you can write this code this way, right? Now let me know if anyone has any question. So things that you need to remember: all the 7 events. So before insert, before update, before delete, after insert, after update, after delete. These context variables you need to keep in mind, and the syntax part. That's it. Not there is not too much here into there actually. Now, what you want to do here, instead of throwing error, you want to do something else. You want to insert a new record. You want to delete some other record. So that's all what you can do actually. So there's no problem with that. Correct. Let me know if anyone has a question or doubt here. Okay. Now there's just this small concept of a bulk trigger. Okay, what is a bulk trigger? A trigger for bulk records. Okay, all triggers are by default bulk triggers, which means they can handle bulk records. Like in this case, this trigger that you have written is capable of handling bulk records multiple because it's a loop, right? It's not trigger.new. I told you context variables by default they are list. Okay, the data type is list of S object, which means they return multiple records. Then your loop is running here. All right. Now, when you are putting it inside a loop, then your uh, the logic is that it will automatically handle multiple records also. So, if you are trying to insert multiple records through data loader or through some other program or through some other code, it's going to take care of that as well. So, it's like so all your triggers are by default bulk triggers. Okay, so if you are writing it, if you are writing the trigger this way, and this is the only way you can write trigger, you cannot actually go and directly compare a value for trigger.new. So that cannot happen. So you always have to write it this way. So triggers are by default bulk triggers. So you don't have to worry that how is your trigger going to handle multiple records. By default, it has been designed in such a way that it is meant to handle multiple records. Here. So this is
There is limit maximum
is there a limit for
data limit like 90,000 or 50,000 something.
data? Sorry,
Maximum 90,000. Is there a limit
limit for what?
for bulk operation?
Okay. See, what happens with Salesforce is everything has a limit here. Okay, everything means because it's a shared platform. This is not your personal server. This is a shared server basically, right? Other people are also using it. So Salesforce strictly imposes a lot of limits and it puts a limit on everything. But that's something which we are actually going to talk about after a couple of more sessions. That's where we will talk about limits and we'll talk how to overcome those limits and how to actually write a program to deal with that. So limit is there for everything. How many records you can insert in one go, there is a limit. How many records you can retrieve, that there is a limit. How many daemon statements you can process, there is a limit. For everything there is a limit. Yes. So for now, I'm not getting detailed into the limits part, but we are going to talk about that. All right. Okay. So if you guys want, you can actually take a screenshot of the code here for the trigger.